Okay, so we just got back from our Twinfino trip. We actually went to Tofino, and I coined the term Twinfino because it was our twinny trip. And we had this realization that although we travel together a lot, we actually haven't gone on many trips, just us, without the context of a retreat. This was actually only our second just for us trip.
Yeah, we almost feel kind of selfish for taking them because we do get to travel so much together for work. But work trips are not the same as personal trips.
Not
And
at all.
we got to completely unplug. We had no calls, no notifications. We were in this really small, gorgeous nature surf town. And a lot of funny things happened, okay, during the trip that we just have to laugh about.
Yes.
We just have to share the stories because they brought us so much joy. But when we first got to the airport to leave for Tofino, we walk in and within minutes, I'm like, I just like do this like quick gasp. And she's like, what? And I'm like, I think that's the guy from This Is Us.
And I was like, that's Justin Hartley.
And we're honestly such losers. Like, I personally could not be caught dead going up to someone and asking for a photo.
I could.
You really
And I
wanted
have.
to. Yeah.
I could and I have.
I know, but I asked you, like, what are you going to do with the photo?
It's not about that. I think it's just about like.
But what is it about?
It's like a commemoration of like the moment, I guess. And because I really love that show. Like
I know.
It has changed me on a cellular level. I love that show. David would always come in the room after I was done watching it. And he's like, do you need a moment? And I'm like, I do.
Yes.
And I would just need time to process. So I also watched him on Passions, which was his first soap, I think. And so I don't know. And I think I told you this. I said, if you didn't think it was so embarrassing, I probably would have. But I
It's
felt
so
like too
embarrassing.
much shame to
I'm
do it.
sorry, I shamed
No,
you.
you did shame me.
Because you were like, should we go? And I was
You're like, no. And then I asked, well, will you take a picture of me? And you were like, yeah, I'll do that. And I was like, well, then I'll take one of you. And you said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so then that's
It was
when
too
I
uneven.
said,
It was too uneven. So we noticed him in the cafeteria first, and he had his son. He looks like a celebrity, honestly.
He really does.
Just on his own.
aura.
His aura. Yeah, we're like, he is famous.
Yes.
So anyways, we confirmed it was him, and then we just kind of like hovered for a little while. And then he like left the cafeteria, and Gina was like, oh my God, no, like I'm losing my chance. Only to find out that he was actually on the exact same flight as us.
Which is a tiny plane. I think there's 18 seats on this plane.
Not even.
Because it went like 2 to 10 and there's 2 per.
Oh, I guess you're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
16?
Yeah. Less than 20
yes,
seats.
yes.
And we were all in the waiting area together because we were in the smaller airport. It's not like the international major airport. It's like
Yeah.
the tiny airport. So we're all waiting to get in line to board. And we just decide to start doing these puns around him because we've decided we're not going to ask him for a photo. Like, we're not going to bother him, right? So when they called for our flight, they were like, okay, like boarding to Tofino. Gina and I were like, all right, this is us.
This is us.
We did it so many times
So many
around
times.
him.
Oh,
Like,
is this us?
Is this
Oh,
us?
This is us.
And then we got to like boarding the flight, and we were the last ones to board before him.
Yeah.
We were like, this is us. We
This
just
is
like
us.
we just kept saying it over and over, and I swear he knew.
It was such a small space.
It was so obvious,
It'd be
right?
pretty dumb and deaf of him if he didn't hear and didn't notice. I'm sure he noticed. The funniest part, though, was Sam was just sitting in this row of seats in front of him. He was like in the row behind Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm going to take a picture of you.
So I was just being casual. Like, I just had like my drink or whatever, and I was like looking to the side. And then she got this photo of him just in the back on his phone. And I was like, why did you take that? And she was like, do me next. And then she went to go sit down, and she just like posed like, as if it was for like a literal school photo. And he's just in the back. And then we took a selfie
With
our
him in
heads
between.
with our heads together, but like a space so that like his head could like be.
So we did get the photo,
We got the shot
just without consent.
without consent.
Yes. But there was another group of people that did approach him and say, oh, like you're from This Is Us. And he was, pretty friendly. But I lost my chance because when we landed, I said, okay, when we land, if there's an opportunity, I'm going to ask. Like, I think I just need to ask.
And there was totally an opportunity.
There really
He
was.
was waiting for his bag, and I was like, do you want to go now?
And I said no. And then he left and I said, I missed my chance.
But you know what the funniest thing was? I don't know if you were paying attention to this, but I was observing all the other people and their behavior. People act a fool, dude, as soon
They
as they
do.
see a celebrity. Like,
AKA us.
yeah. I don't feel like I was just being funny, but I wasn't acting weird and nervous like you and the other people. I didn't think it was a big deal. I was more just like, oh, like, shit, that's the guy. Like, from This Is
I
Us.
feel like we were all acting
No. Like there was that other couple.
They
where
were definitely acting
They
weird.
were like doing like the whisper look over thing and
Yes.
like should we sit? And I was just watching them and I was like, why are y'all being so weird?
Well, we were doing it just audibly. We were just like laughing and cackling. But they were, doing the whispering. Like, I think they also wanted a photo. And that's kind of why I didn't want to, because I was worried that if I asked, I would start like the chain of photos. And I didn't want to be the catalyst to that. So I was kind of hoping that somebody else would. And then I would probably feel, oh, I can't ask now because they already did. So realistically, I probably never would have gotten the photo, but I did.
The non-consensual photo.
Yes. And so it was hysterical. That kicked off our trip. And then from there, it was just, pure bliss.
It was an unfolding, ever-present moment. But don't you think that the inside joke is so much more valuable than the photo?
100%. But
right?
The photo would have, I think, you know what? I don't need the photo.
I don't need the photo to cement it. Like, I know what I saw. I know what I saw, and I know what I experienced.
I think if that was, because I actually met another cast member from that show at another airport. And
the Randall character.
Randall. And I didn't even love his character on the show. He wasn't one of my favorites, but I really liked Kevin on the show. I don't know why. If it was Mandy Moore, there's no way I wouldn't be able to ask for a photo. I love Mandy Moore. She's Rapunzel in the Disney movie.
Like since Walk to Remember. Maybe even
before,
prior, her music career.
Like the I gonna crush on you. Do you know that song?
Yes.
Oh, that song.
I was more just excited that you were singing for the audience.
That was not really my actual singing, but I'm just joking. But she, like, that's somebody I would for sure ask.
Oh, yeah. I think I would ask Mandy for a photo because I also feel like she would want to do that for you.
And I think because I just know, like, she really has been a huge part of, like, my childhood. I remember her first album, and it's the Walk to Remember. Justin Hartley, I didn't need it. And so that's why I was on the fence. But I think you're right that the inside joke, because for the rest of the trip, me and Sam just kept saying, this is us.
Yeah, we would literally arrive somewhere and be like, this is us. Or we'd find our car in the parking lot and be like, this is us. And I said, that's my favorite thing about going on a trip. It's like making an inside joke immediately and then saying it the entire
time.
Trip.
Yes.
But anyways, this podcast today is not going to be about all the celebrity near sightings that we've made or photos that we've captured.
No.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about today's topic because it was something that someone in our community actually left a question about.
Okay, yes.
Because in our last episode, we said, if you're inside of our community, we're going to post a Q&A form where you can ask any unlimited number of questions. And this came up, I think, at least twice, but not just recently. It's come up many more times in our DMs.
I actually think in season 1, somebody suggested this toxic relationship topic that I just spoiled. I realized at this moment. But
don't you know that you're toxic?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm excited to talk about toxicity, toxic relationships. It kind of seems like this term that we just throw around very casually, like, oh, they're so toxic, like I cut toxic people out of my life, I'm so toxic this, or they're so toxic that. And so we wanted to give our own opinions around what we truly believe toxic behavior is and what it isn't. Because something that is a bit unpopular of an opinion, and you don't have to agree, by the way, we're just two people, you don't have to agree with everything we say. But one of the things that I think is really toxic is to be that person who's like, they're toxic, I'm cutting them out, without doing any inner work and getting curious and getting to understand that person's behavior. Obviously, there are certain experiences that don't need a lot of explanation.
Yeah.
But if you are constantly calling people toxic and cutting them out, it sounds a little bit like avoidant. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I was excited to share my own personal views on toxicity and how I have been able to spot it in my life and how I've engaged with it or disengaged with it. And also I've learned about the things that I do that are also toxic as well. And I feel like it takes one to know one. You know what I mean? Like you cannot be someone standing there calling everyone toxic if you yourself have not engaged in some semi to fully toxic behaviors.
Touche. That's very true. Yeah, I feel like I'm someone that definitely attracted a lot of toxic relationships, which then I realized I'm the one engaging in them, right? Like there's a level of responsibility that we need to take in observing like why this keeps happening to us. Because I feel like a lot of people, even that we've coached, tend to attract a certain type of person over and over.
Yes.
Or I'm sure we all have a friend that keeps dating like the same guy.
Yeah.
Not the actual same person, but it's like the same problems, the same type of behaviors. And so I think one of the things that I've realized about myself is that I have a toxic trait that attracts that kind of person, and engages in those types of relationships. And so there's a level of toxicity in the allowance of those behaviors that I couldn't take responsibility for in the beginning because I was like, no, it's definitely them. But if I'm the one allowing it to continue to happen, I'm also contributing to that toxicity, which was hard to swallow and hard to admit, but it was the truth.
Yeah, something we talked about before we hit record was that I think that the toxicity we're referring to is actually the kind that you can only experience in relation.
Yes.
Right? Because toxicity alone, I don't think we would call that toxic. That would just be like self-destructive. Right? Like those behaviors, if they weren't actually in relation to other people, would just be problematic self-abusive behaviors. But toxic, and when we call someone toxic, we're saying their behaviors or their actions impact me in a certain way. And so the toxicity is actually a relationship, and there's a part that everyone plays in that dynamic.
Yeah.
Which I think is what you're leading to.
Yeah. One of the greatest knowings that I've carried with me for a very long time, for decades now, is that you teach people how to treat you.
Ooh.
And so when I realized, I'm teaching these people that it's okay to treat me this way.
Yeah.
I'm teaching these people that I will put up with it. I'm teaching these people that I will take whatever you dump on me and I won't speak my boundary. I won't even set a boundary. I won't honor a boundary. I'll just keep taking it. And that's when I realized I have an involvement in teaching them that I'm the kind of person that will take that. And that's what I mean when I say that there's a level of toxicity on my end, right? And so when I took responsibility for this behavior that I was allowing to continue to happen, that's when I was able to start setting those boundaries and kind of exit that toxicity era, I would say, because I don't think I would ever engage in those relationships anymore. I think my radar is a lot stronger. And the reason why I kept engaging in those relationships was because of fear. Like not wanting to lose this relationship. Like I got to like make sure that they stay. Like how do I make them not be mad at me anymore? And I honestly do think it starts pretty young. Like my daughter's actually in quite a few of these relationships already because—
Dude, she's in so many toxic triangles and she's like 9.
She's been in them since she was like 6.
True.
And it's so interesting because she sometimes will give advice to my friends about these types of relationships, which is hysterical. But
it's
she
so good.
She actually is very wise when it comes to this because she's experienced it. She's like, I get it.
But like, I've been there.
I've been there. But it starts so young because so much of our identity is enveloped in the relationships that we have at school. Like that impacts who you are to also everybody else in that context. And so, it's interesting to observe how early it starts. And so I've been able to have a lot of compassion for myself, even though I'm aware that, wow, I really have allowed a lot of that to happen. But you have to go through that arc.
You have to go through that arc. And I think something else we mentioned about toxicity inside of a relationship is that any person in that dynamic or both persons in that dynamic, the toxic part is not acknowledging that you have any role in it.
Yes.
Did I already say that? Maybe I did. But I think that's really important because you could say that some of the behaviors that you and I have engaged in without any curiosity and awareness and questioning around it, you could say, oh, that's toxic. Right? Like if someone's getting jealous or something like that, or if someone's getting insecure, like, oh, that's so toxic, I'm cutting them out. Right? Or they're like withdrawing. It's like, oh, that's toxic. But if that person takes responsibility for how that emotion is manifesting and presenting itself and they're sharing that vulnerably, I don't think that's toxic.
I agree.
I don't think experiencing an emotion is toxic.
I agree.
I think believing that you have no responsibility for that emotion is toxic.
Yes, that's a really good distinction because I actually just talked to somebody, it must have been one of my clients, about jealousy. And there's this very weird energy of villainizing jealousy,
Yes.
like it's bad,
Like it's
and that
super
you
bad,
should never
shameful.
be jealous, especially if it's your friend. And I said to her, if you're going to be jealous of anyone, I feel like it would be your friend.
Like who else would you be jealous
Who else?
of?
Because you know the person intimately. And I said, the important thing to recognize is not just the jealousy, but looking at what's underneath that, right? And so in this context, it was about being jealous of a certain relationship that they were having outside of like that friendship. And I said, when you look at why the jealousy is there, like what is the need of the jealousy? It's ultimately connection. And that's not toxic.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's actually a very beautiful intention
Yes.
if you look past the first layer of jealousy, because there's always, I always say that every feeling is valid, maybe not every reaction, but every feeling is valid simply because you're having it. So if you can look at that experience of jealousy and remove the mask of that's bad and that's shameful and just see, oh, like what's this need inside of here? And then you're able to speak on that. That's not toxic at all.
It's when you don't communicate it that it becomes toxic.
And when you project it to the other person to fix it.
Exactly, which is actually a really great opportunity for us to talk about that we have been jealous of each other.
Many times.
Yeah, but I don't think it's bad. We've done the
No.
shadow work around it, and I actually kind of love it because it brings us closer together. And we
Same.
learn so much about ourselves in that process. But the reason why it's not toxic is because if I feel it or you feel it, we're like, I'm feeling really jealous. Interesting. I want to know what that's about. Oh, maybe it's because I haven't been spending much time with her lately. Maybe it's because I'm not acknowledging my own gifts. Okay, maybe it's because I haven't yet exercised this courageously or whatever. And then it gives ourselves permission to do that, and then we share it. And then we're like, wow, I'm so glad you told me that because I felt the same way. Or I didn't realize you were feeling that way. And then what we get is connection instead of separation. Whereas most people would experience jealousy and then be like, fuck her. Literally. They'd be like, I hate her. Like, I don't know. She just triggers me. She just makes me feel bad and I don't want to spend time with her.
Yes.
Imagine if I did that to you. You'd be like, what? Like, what'd I do?
Yes.
And then I started just treating you like I didn't care about you or like I didn't want to spend time with you. Like, that would be so toxic.
Right.
But what's so funny is that I would think that you were the toxic
I was
one.
just gonna say that.
And so it's such an illusion. It's such a distortion.
Yeah.
And I think toxicity is really the result of distortion. It's not seeing your own emotions clearly for what they are.
Yeah, something I said before we started recording is toxicity is almost like alcohol. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's like you're drunk. You're under the influence, which we said a lot in season 1. But that is what it is. It's like you're distorting and not actually seeing what's there and also able to like name it. And so I think to your point about the jealousy thing, those are the moments that really have brought us even closer because we can see ourselves in it so quickly. Where as soon as you say you felt jealousy, I'm like, wait, I was jealous of you.
And then we get to heal our distortions.
Yes.
That's the most important part because I
Yeah.
think, again, toxicity is the result of a distortion. It's something that you're not looking at, and then you're behaving as a result of that.
And then the other person behaves in response to that behavior.
Exactly,
and
they
it
react.
keeps going. Because I've definitely been in friendships, I would say like early 20s, where there was a lot of jealousy, but there wasn't actually a naming of it. It would just be this weird energy where I would know that maybe they were jealous or maybe I was jealous, but we're all pretending like it's not there.
And that's how it becomes toxic.
Exactly. Because like I said, it's like we're then responding to the reactions because now there's a bit of avoiding. There's a bit of like passive aggressiveness. There's certain comments about whatever like you're wearing maybe or, your behavior. There might be like, oh, like that's weird that you do that. And there's just those energies. And then all of a sudden the friendship is really fake.
Yeah, and there's so many ruptures that happened, and then it leads to
Yes.
resentment, and that's why it's fake because there's not a genuine connection there anymore. It just feels like an obligation. But the more I talk about this, I'm realizing that the toxicity really is you not owning your truth. Because then it leads to the fakeness. It leads to these weird, dodgy behaviors. It leads to this rejection of yourself and the other person, which is what we're calling toxicity, right?
Yeah.
And there have been many times between Gina and I where we have felt emotions that are not hunky-dory, right? I remember the last time I talked to you about something, I think it was in February, I was like, I'm really annoyed about that. And it was an opportunity for me to fully own what I felt and take responsibility for it. And in doing that, you got to clarify for me so much that I wasn't able to see in my own psyche.
Right.
And that's the whole point of authentically owning an emotion in a relationship is that you get the opportunity to co-regulate that emotion, to heal that emotion, to make sense of that emotion. And if we don't actually authentically share what we're feeling, that's how we internalize, and that's what starts to affect our behavior in negative ways.
That's so true. Now, I think the question is going to be, what do you do when you have you're in a relationship with somebody who maybe isn't doing the work or wouldn't have that response? So let's just say you say to me, hey, I was really annoyed by that. And then I say, that has nothing to do with me. Like that's, whatever my response might be. Maybe it'd be like, I didn't do anything. And I respond to you that way. How should somebody handle
What's
that?
funny is like, who's toxic now?
Well, that's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing.
But if you are the one that is aware of what's kind of going on, how would you recommend somebody respond in that scenario?
To the person bringing you the emotion.
So you say to me that you were kind of annoyed about something.
Okay.
And then I say, that has nothing to do with me. Like, that's all you. And I get defensive and I just project it right back to you. Now you leave feeling like
totally unheard.
Totally
invalidated.
unheard.
Now I start acting weird towards you.
Now you're mad at me.
Yep.
Because I haven't held space for that. Because I think in the context of our relationship, I realize that we have a lot of privilege in our relationship because I know that when I bring something to you, it's going to be met with love and understanding and empathy and a desire to understand. But I think most people are not in relationships like that, which is kind of the point of this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the number one antidote to toxicity is always going to be curiosity. Because it's the antidote to projection, right? Because I can't project if I'm curious about what you're feeling, right? As soon as I remove curiosity out of the equation, then I just judge what you're feeling.
And there's a lot of assumptions.
Yes, assumptions and judgment, and that's what creates the separation and then the harmful behavior. So I think the reason why we can't categorize anything we've ever experienced between us as toxic is because there's always curiosity and validation.
Yes.
And generally speaking, if we are curious and can validate someone's feeling, it doesn't lead to the harmful behavior. The harmful behavior is, generally speaking, there are exceptions, but is the result of unchecked feelings, being invalidated, feeling like shameful about what you're experiencing, and then you're feeling so small inside that you react in some really inappropriate way. You know, I think about children, and children who are really dysregulated feel like they don't have a sense of agency or emotional support. And so I think as adults, it's the same. If I come to you with something and you're like, well, that has nothing to do with me, it may make sense then that I feel so invalidated that I yell or I cut you off or whatever. So those behaviors are the results of unmet feelings.
Right. They're symptoms.
Yes. And so I think every human being who's listening to this, whether you've cut someone out for being toxic or you've recognized toxicity in yourself, it's a human thing to sometimes judge and invalidate people's emotions because we do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves. And so the healing is learning to not do that to yourself, and then you don't do it to other people. And then people don't feel the need to act in these really insane ways. Now, again, there are exceptions to this. There are people who literally have issues, and no amount of curiosity is going to heal that. And in that case, you need to take responsibility for your role in that dynamic.
And that's, I think, where I can really speak to that, especially having been someone who's engaged in a lot of these kind of relationships. I was just basically...
you were just taking it.
I don't want to say I was a doormat, but kinda. I really desire to have close, tight-knit relationships. I did not have a close relationship with my family. I've moved so many times. My husband is friends with the same people he knew since birth.
So is mine.
And I don't have that. I've never, I think my longest, but what's funny is I've known you for 5 years.
Yeah.
But for lifetimes. I think my longest actual friend is probably my friend Grace, and I've known her since I was 14-ish. But even that, we've had so many gaps in our relationship. But my point is that I think I've been always craving that kind of that best friend that we always go to each other's houses, or that person that feels like family, which, I mean, I think that's why I met my husband, and we're so close right away, and we got engaged after a year. But I'm just reflecting on the relationships that I was in, and this, I want to call it almost like an obsession to make them fit into that spot. Be that person for me. And so that's why I was so willing to put up with things, because for me, what was more important was to maintain the relationship, not how I felt in it.
Yeah, well, and I can see that you clinging and grasping to those relationships was you not meeting your own needs first.
Exactly.
Right?
Which you can say is toxic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you were being toxic to yourself.
Exactly.
So notice how you're then attracting a toxic relationship, because I saw this thing on TikTok and it was pretty savage. And she was like, the partner you choose shows how self-loving or non-loving you are.
It's so true.
And it's so true, right? It's if you genuinely love yourself, aka I accept all of the versions of me, all of my feelings, I listen to myself, I soothe myself, then you really do not put up with people who don't do that.
100%.
It wouldn't make any sense. You're just I'm not used to that. One of the things I know to be sure about myself is that I had a very strong relationship with my dad, and I still do.
Yeah.
So the idea of dating a fuckboy, that was just never going to happen. I would be huh?
Right.
Why are you being a dick?
Right.
I wouldn't be oh, wow, I really want his attention. It just was not resonant with me. And so it's the same thing. When you don't meet your own need of feeling loved, then you will put up with toxic behavior to get love.
It also looks a lot like love when you're used to very tumultuous relationships.
Yeah.
Like for me, I thought yelling and arguing and being in discomfort and tension, like that was so familiar.
Totally.
And so I think I sought after chaotic relationships because that is what felt familiar, obviously very unconsciously. But to your point, I really did not value or love myself at all, which is why I like externalized and outsourced my value to how much this person loves me back. And so when I started the journey, actually, it was really like when I met you, I really started to love myself. I also got to experience what it feels like to be consciously loved by somebody. It became very clear to me what relationships had to go. Because again, I could see so clearly that me continuing to stay in this relationship would be a self-abandonment.
Yes.
It would be a self-rejection. And I just wasn't unwilling to do that anymore. And that's why that became such an easy decision for me. But I remember everybody, including you, thought I wouldn't do it because I was so somebody that would just keep on putting up with it in fear that I would let them down or hurt their feelings. And I kept putting everybody above my needs. Now, I'm not suggesting we say like, fuck everybody else and I'm all that matters. But in the relationship that I was in, this was a friendship. It really was, I don't want to say it was one-sided, but wouldn't you say it was one-sided?
I mean, I'll just say something else. I'll say that you tried many times
Thank you for saying
to
that. Yes.
usher and transition it into a more conscious relationship.
Yes.
And that person could not engage in those ways. And so at that point, you have to make a decision, right? And so I think the cutting off thing, we're not saying don't do that. We're saying, make sure to practice that with discernment and make sure you've gone through the hoops. Like, have you engaged with curiosity? Like, have you set a boundary? Like, have you done these things to hopefully transition your relationship into something that's more supportive? Because if not, then I think you're kind of toxic. And frankly, I'm talking about myself because there were many times in my early life where literally a friend would piss me off and I would be like, you're a bitch, I don't want to hang out. Like, I would just be
Very
like,
Aries of you.
I'm kind of just like, I don't need that energy in my life. Instead of being like, oh, like, why did you get upset about that? And then we could have probably been friends for a lot longer, right? Because it would have been an opportunity to connect. But instead, I just did the toxic thing of not looking at myself or my own triggers. And I was like, I'm not dealing with that. And then the relationship dissolved. And so I think a lot of relationships could be salvaged, but the intention here is not for you to salvage every single relationship. Not every relationship is meant to be, but can we engage in the relationships we are in with as much curiosity as possible to prevent the amount of toxicity between both of you? Because it's actually not possible to be in a relationship where only one person is toxic.
Yes.
It's just not.
It's just not.
Like, it's literally like a toxic wheel, right? I was working with, you guys heard her on the podcast. I think it was episode 48, Miss Yolanda Renteria.
Oh, love her.
She came on and talked about generational trauma after we had done some work together about relationships. And it was really important that I learned that everything happens relationally and in a dynamic. Nothing happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So something toxic that I started doing actually was saying that I was responsible for everything. Remember that phase?
Yes.
Where I was like, it's
remember
me,
that phase.
it's me, it's me. I'm so sorry, it's me. I'm the problem. I'm the problem. And she was like, it's impossible for you to be the problem every single time. And I was like, but I think I am.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, there's no such thing as you reacting in isolation. This is always a pattern. You're reacting to something in the other person's behavior, and then they are reacting to your behavior. Like, it is literally a game of tennis. Like, this is not, what's the one that you do?
Ping pong.
Well, no, I was going to say this is not a game of squash. Like, because that's the one where there's a wall and not another person.
Right, I understand.
It is a two-person game.
Yes.
Ping pong.
Is a two-person
Tennis.
game. Yes.
Pickleball. It's one of those.
Yes.
The toxicity is bouncing off of each other.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me to recognize because I only lived in this binary system where either they were toxic and they had to fix everything or be removed from my life, or I'm toxic and I live in complete shame and self-blame, which doesn't actually remove the toxicity. I actually continue to engage in toxic behaviors when I riddle myself with shame. So I had to embrace this third paradigm, which is very hard for humans because we're so used to left, right, up, down, black, white. But this third paradigm where it's like, okay, maybe it's both. Maybe
it's
you are
both.
sometimes, maybe I am sometimes. Maybe I am because you do this and you are because I do this. It's both people taking responsibility. And I truly believe you can only be in a harmonious relationship when both people do that work. Otherwise, yes, it's going to become one-sided. And pretty heartbreaking, but a lot of people who go through their self-healing, they start to become more conscious in the way they communicate with themselves and other people. And they're able to see, wow, some people in my life are not able to do that with me. And we encourage you to try, but if it's not there, that's also okay to move on, because then you're continuing to engage in a toxic pattern.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know, if you're in like a pool of piranhas and they're like eating away at your flesh, like your foot is still in there and you can take it out. It's kind of like you're staying. And so, and again, it's that allowance of that behavior. But I think what this really points to, and what I can speak on from my personal experience, is it has to start with you removing your toxic relationship with yourself.
Literally, that's the source of everything.
That's a source of everything.
Everything. And that's a really, honestly, you might be disagreeing with us, guys, and that's totally okay. You have free choice. But that is the source of all toxicity in your life.
Yeah.
Like, because everything is a reflection of you. And that's not to say everything is your fault, right? This is not a self-blame. We're not telling you to blame yourself for this, but just simply notice and observe this. Because if you engage in toxic behaviors towards yourself, what can you expect but to experience? On the flip side, once Gina and I really began to heal the way that we speak to ourselves, dialogue with ourselves, connect with ourselves, it seemed almost unacceptable. Literally, it was like I was allergic to it, to the unchecked behavior or unconscious lack of curiosity in other people's behaviors. It was like, it just felt like grating. I think we said that before, that once you start to vibrate at a different resonance, other vibrations just feel like, oh my gosh, like I don't really know how to handle that. But I was able to engage with as much curiosity in the relationships I wanted to maintain. And we did transition into being more conscious partners. I mean, I feel like we continuously transition to being even more conscious partners together as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, like we move through the rungs of consciousness, the spirals of consciousness.
We're spiraling higher. Yeah. I mean, it definitely has created a template for me, for sure, which I think we've said many times. But my mind is now going to, like, what if it's like a family member? Like, what if it's your dad? Well, my family is not toxic in that, I think
but a previous version of you might have thought so, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Because your perspective has changed and now suddenly they're not toxic.
I don't think I would have used that word. I think it would have been more like, I don't know. Toxic just to me feels very different, like manipulative, I guess, and kind of like playing games. They weren't doing any of that. We just like weren't close, and it was like a lot of neglect, I think, more than anything. But I'm just thinking about some of my own clients and people that I know who have like alcoholic fathers, mothers who, have their own issues, and maybe you live with them. And so how do you kind of avoid that toxicity when you live in the home with them? And I think, my advice would always be, again, to come back to self. And we can't control people around us, and especially if you live in the home with them, but your relationship to their behavior is ultimately what's affecting you. And again, it's relationship to yourself. So, expecting them to change so that you can feel better is what's going to create so much pain and suffering, where if you can find ways to soothe yourself, to be there for yourself, to ground you, to love on you. And I know that that's maybe sounds oversimplified, but that really is what it distills down to.
Yeah, my favorite part about that was you saying that it's ultimately your relationship to their behavior that causes you to feel a certain way. And that is hard to hear because it feels like people are doing things to us, right? But in the same vein, it feels like if you don't get more curious about your relationship to the behavior, then what you end up doing is really just judging. And judging, you could say, is a form of toxicity, right? And it causes more of that separation that you're experiencing, when in reality, you want to feel connection. And so connection is not going to come across through judging and separation. It would be curiosity and honestly through acceptance. And acceptance doesn't have to look like, I love this behavior, but it looks like that is what they are going through right now, and that is how they are coping. But because I accept that, this is how I'm going to engage now. And that may be taking a step back, but you can't do that until you actually accept their behavior. And when I say accept, I do not mean condone.
Right.
Those are
or
very,
like.
Right.
Yes.
Those are very different things. I mean, acknowledge that it's happening. That's it. That is happening. Do not reject what is happening, because then you're fighting with yourself at that point, not the other person.
Yeah.
But accept that it's happening and then choose how you want to move forward. And it may not be with that person. And so I think you said something about living together, which obviously complicates things for sure. But as adults, we hopefully have the choice and the consciousness to be able to move out of that situation or find ways to create safety within ourselves.
Yeah.
In that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, we had a conversation actually on the way here kind of about this type of relationship. And it is really hard when it's somebody that you deeply love and it is a family member. Yeah. So just for anybody who is going through that, I can definitely relate. And it is painful. But what's more painful is not setting that boundary for yourself. And that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like,
And expecting them and wanting them to change. It's so
yeah.
painful.
And I think that it goes back to something I've said before. And I don't even know if I've actually said this on the pod, but just in my own life, that when you live in your truth, it actually opens the door for the other person to do the same. Now, if I continue to engage in a relationship with somebody who is in a toxic place in their life, maybe they are dealing with, alcoholism or whatever it might be, sometimes it feels like, oh, I can't leave them because like they need me, right? But kind of enables that behavior. And now if I speak my truth and say, hey, I cannot be around this type of behavior or, in this season of your life because it affects me negatively or it's affecting my mental health, me creating that boundary, I believe, opens the door for the path that they're meant to go on because that's my truth. And if I ignore my truth and I live in the lie of I'm okay with this, then it again perpetuates that. Now, I'm not saying that you leaving this relationship would now inspire this person to completely change, but doing the opposite, I definitely don't think that would that definitely wouldn't create change. But for you, again, loving yourself enough to know that this I cannot be around this anymore, and trusting that they will then go on the journey that they're meant to go on.
Yeah, I want to say the positive spin potentially is that gives them the opportunity to finally be there for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hard to hear.
Really hard to hear.
And like think about. But I'm just thinking about the different friendships that I've let go of, which there's like, I feel like it sounds like I've like cut so many people off, but it's really only like 2, right?
Right.
Maybe 3. But like you said, sorry?
Couple 3.
Couple 3.
Which is what my dad always says.
Really?
He's always like, couple 3.
Couple 3. It's like 2.5. I feel like those relationships, like you said, I really did try, but I don't look back and think, like, I don't look at them and think, oh, like, I'm so fucking glad I left you. Or I'm not like, I don't have that energy. I truly wish them well. And it's just a choice I had to make for my well-being. And again, my own mental health. And really I don't want to say protection of myself, but kind of. It's the same thing I would do for my daughter, right? If she was engaging in certain things that were hurting her, it's something that I would stop. Again, it's kind of like if you like burn yourself, you're like going to remove your hand off of the stove because that's hurting you. And so I think it's okay, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy or that it won't be painful. So if you are going through a relationship that you might be breaking up with, you're not alone.
Yeah, definitely not alone. Oh my gosh, I can just imagine how many people will feel solace in this conversation. But another thing we all have to accept too is like not everyone's going to heal in this lifetime.
Oh my God.
Not everyone is going to heal. And it's really not your job to like wake people up, right? It's not your job to do work for other people.
That's
Frankly,
so true.
it's not the work unless you do it.
Yourself.
Yeah. It's the inner work is like you doing it with yourself. Like there is no work that someone can do on you. And I don't know, the example I think of is like family members like putting people in rehab. It's like it never works. Like they need to check themselves in. And so obviously we're talking about a range of behaviors at this point, but at the end of the day, the person will have to take responsibility for themselves and you have to take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's really important that you too, as a person who may be engaging with a toxic person, like that you don't fully blame the person either, right? But you also take responsibility for the role that you're contributing in that relationship. And maybe your responsibility is to say, hey, this is how it's impacting me and this is what I'm going to do in these situations. And if it doesn't change, then maybe you do have to end the relationship or change its form.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier too about the judgment piece, because I think where I'm at now, I do have a lot of empathy for these behaviors, right? And now no longer talking about the whole like alcoholism stuff, but more like, okay, if somebody is really jealous or, exhibits passive aggressive behavior, I can see that that is their pattern.
100%.
Right? I can see like, I know why that's happening, but that doesn't mean I still have to then deal with that. And just again, like put up with that, because you and me both are very deeply ingrained patterns, and we both can see when they're coming up.
I'm like, oh,
there it is.
It's like that TikTok video where it's like, ha, 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 ha. Oh.
I mean, I haven't seen it, but
you haven't seen it?
No, I don't go on TikTok. I don't watch TikToks.
Oh my God, it's so it's just like there's been so many different like stitches to it where it's like when your friend when it's like funny but not funny or whatever. And it's like, I'm laughing, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh.
I mean, yeah.
Same with you though. Like you've noticed me sometimes and you're like, oh, we're not laughing right now.
This is not funny. Not yet. Not yet. Well, it's interesting because I think in the beginning, I want to say that I maybe flirted with toxic behaviors, I think, in our relationship. In the very beginning.
The codependent ones.
The codependent one, which is toxic. On some level.
Yeah.
There's a flavor of toxic.
Totally.
A little dash. Because again, I think when I met Sam, I had already given up on this like imaginary like best fucking friend. I was like, whatever, she doesn't exist. And then Sam came around and I was like, I found her. I found her.
You
and
found
then
me.
I remember my husband was like, but what if she like doesn't feel the same way about you? And I was like, why would you even say that? And then it made me think, oh no, like what if I do love her more than she loves me? And what if like I want to be friends with her more than she wants to be friends with me? And it started to go into that, again, that codependency, that grippy energy. And I remember something I heard, I think it might have been on the Lewis Howes podcast, but he said, when you really want something in your life, you have to be equally okay with not having it.
That was actually Kyle Cease on his podcast.
Oh, okay. So
who was on our podcast, by the way?
I love Kyle Cease.
Episode 11.
It was episode 11 on 8/8, August 8th.
Oh, yeah.
The Lions. Yeah, Lions Portal. And that really struck me, this whole idea that the more you really want something, having that equal okayness with not having it, because that's detachment, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of embody that where I have this inner knowing that we're just going to make the best of the time that we have. Now, obviously, I hope that we do actually stay friends forever, but I don't know. I think it was interesting kind of flirting with that a little bit at the beginning, but I think because our relationship continuously proved to me that I didn't need to grip, right? And that there was a safety in the way that we can communicate and that there was nothing that I could do or you could do that would make us be like, I'm done. You know, that there was always this openness to discuss, get curious, clarify, and to actually trust in the clarification. So I guess it was a very short-lived toxic phase.
Well, what you just described is really, to me, a microcosm of what the universe is trying to teach all of us here, which is like, you don't need to grip. Like you're gonna be fine. You're going to have everything. It is an abundant universe. And I think that toxicity, especially like the type that we're talking about in relationship, like those strange behaviors when like I'm not getting what I need from you and I'm projecting that you did this to me, right? That also is a result of scarcity.
It is. Super scarcity.
Like I'm thinking about especially girls who are in friendships since like middle school era or even Emmeline's age, right? It's like you can be friends with her but not with me. Or like you're friends with me and not with her. It's like, oh my God, it's so scarce. It's like only you can be friends with me. Or
you can only have one best friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that behavior is actually a result of you feeling not supported and fully abundant within yourself, right? And so when you said I had to be equally okay with not getting it, it's not because you're actually saying like I'm okay with not having enough. It's actually realizing I'm gonna have what I'm gonna get what I need.
Yes.
Whether it's this relationship or another relationship, I'm always going to have enough love, enough trust, enough faith. It's okay. And when you start believing that that person is like your only source of that, that's when you become toxic.
That's so true. And I mean, ultimately in our relationship, what I can speak to is that I think you constantly always showed me and led me back to myself. And I think that's how we both know right away that it is a distortion. Anytime we have any weird jealousy, weird comparison, whatever feelings between each other, I instantly know, that's a me thing. Let me unpack that. And I think that's the thing to remember too, is that if somebody is exhibiting those toxic behaviors, it's not about you. Like it's about them.
Literally.
And so not making that your problem to solve.
Yeah, and it allows for the relationship to continue deepening, because if I brought something that bothered me to you and every single time you were like, that's not my shit, like that's yours. But if you know that that's my shit, you don't have to do that.
Exactly.
Right? Like I bring it to you and you're just like, wow. Like you're always just like, I totally get why you feel that way. And sometimes I'm like, you do? You do? Like you actually understand why I'm annoyed about that? And you're like, yeah.
That
like
makes
from
sense.
where you're sitting, like I totally get that. And I'm like, oh. And then there's like no need for me to be like acting fucking toxic. And
Right.
and because you know already that I'm basically bringing you my own projection. Honestly, guys, everything is projection.
It really is.
The more I learn, I'm like, oh my God, literally everything. So if you deeply understand that, then you just don't take anything that the person brings personally. And then it's an opportunity
Right.
for them to feel safe with you emotionally.
That's so true. Because if you do bring something to me like, hey, like that really bothered me, I don't do the whole dance of like, well, I didn't mean that. And
Yeah.
I didn't say that. I just go right into, oh my gosh, that must have been like really painful. I can see that. And we get to just deal with what's there
Yeah.
instead of the projection.
Yeah. Or the
And-
defense mechanisms.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because instantly I know I don't need to be defensive.
And I honestly think the defense mechanisms are the toxic behaviors.
Well, yes, that's
Like,
pretty much what we're pointing to.
Basically.
Yes.
So if you don't need to engage in defensiveness because you understand that everything's a projection, then you just engage in really deep conscious conversation. And
Yes.
sometimes they're vulnerable and sometimes they're painful. Like there have been times, I'll never forget at the Vietnamese restaurant several years ago, you were like, I really need to talk to you about something.
I
But like
was
it's not
shaking.
bad. It's not bad. I just really need to say this. And you were like, so this like one time, like I think we were talking and like you just interrupted me and it like made me feel like I don't know what exactly you said, but basically it made you feel really small and like
And stupid.
and stupid or something like that. And I wasn't like, well, I wasn't trying to make you feel stupid.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, oh my God, you felt stupid. Like I was like, I did not mean that, but like I'm basically so sorry you felt that way because
Yeah.
I acknowledge that that's true because I think if I had taken it personally, what I'm saying is like, it's not possible for you to feel that way because I didn't do that. But the reality
Right.
is you do feel that way and you're
Right.
trying to bring it to me. And eventually, if you can't feel emotional safety in the relationship, that's when it becomes resentful and fake, which is what you said in the beginning.
Yes.
So if I had rejected that and I was like toxic essentially, and I was like, I don't know why you're bringing that to me. You're totally making that up. Like you're making it a big deal, right?
Yes.
Now you learn, don't tell Sam when I feel that way because I get rejected and made to feel even worse.
Right.
And now we're not sharing the truth of our experiences. And then our relationship is not based on truth anymore. And now it's a toxic relationship.
I'm so glad you met me with so much kindness and understanding in that moment.
You were shaking in your boots.
I was literally
And
shaking.
I was like, what did I do? And then I was like, oh, okay. First of all, not that bad, but like, okay, like I'm sorry you felt that way.
I mean, it was truly the first time I've ever spoken my truth
I
to
know,
a friend. It
I
really was
know.
my first time. And there have been so many friends that
Like
have
way
been
worse. Like
way worse, way worse. And I just can't say anything because I'm so afraid of being misunderstood. I don't want to get into an argument. And I think for me, I really resisted ever having any issues with you. I was like, no, we can't
Yeah.
tarnish this friendship.
totally.
But sharing that, I mean, it's so funny how far we've come because now I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, that really hurt my feelings. And you're like, oh. Whereas before, I think my face turned like purple. I was like sweating. I was shaking. And I kept on second guessing, like, I shouldn't bring this up.
Yeah.
I shouldn't bring this up.
Or like in February, you were like, I think I need more words of affirmation. And I was like, okay, let's do it. I was like, I'll give you more words of affirmation. And then that one night I was trying to give you words of affirmation. You were like, I have my earplugs in. What? What? And I was like, it's fine. I was just trying to give you words of affirmation.
You were saying something like, you did so great today. I love you so much. And I couldn't hear because I sleep with earplugs. And I was like, huh? What? And you're like trying to have a moment. I was like, tell me tomorrow.
Right. But
Yeah.
imagine if you had told me that and I was like, I literally fucking tell you that you're amazing all the time. Right? Then it's like, oh, okay. Well, then you start learning, like, I
Right.
can't be honest with this person. And I
Right.
think that is when the toxicity starts to slowly seep into the relationship is because now it's not truthful.
Mm-hmm.
I-
There's hiding.
There's hiding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I never feel like I have to hide in our relationship.
Yeah. And so this is an opportunity for if you're listening, like, what relationships are you hiding in?
And what are you hiding in yourself?
That's ultimately what it is, anyways.
That's always what it is. And so I think even for me in that context of wanting to
Yeah.
bring that up to you, if I didn't bring it up to you, I would be hiding from my own truth,
Exactly.
which then creates toxicity in me. And then that gets projected out because that's what's
Exactly.
inside of me. And
then you
so-
start reading everything I do from that lens.
Exactly. Like there she does it. She's doing it again. Great. She did it again. And it's like this built in resentment that keeps building because your brain will keep looking for confirmation for you to be right about that.
Exactly. And then the other person feels really confused when there's an outburst.
Yeah.
But that's also an opportunity for you to be really curious. Like, what led to this?
Right.
Like, why are you having an outburst? Right?
And we've done that actually We've done that.
Yeah, totally.
And we kind of go back and say, what happened like yesterday?
Yeah. I don't think we've ever had like an actual outburst, like totally uncontrollable.
No.
But I've been like, we've both been snippy before.
Definitely.
Where we're like, and we're a little bit like, oh. We're like, oh. And like, we just take a pause. And I think that's really important is that we don't immediately go into like, we don't like add to the drama.
Well, because
it's like only one person being dramatic at a time.
That's true. That's true. But it's also because, again, like I know, once again, it's not about me.
That's it.
Even if it seems like it's about me. And I think there was maybe one time where I was like, I think it is me. But then we were able to like talk about it. But for the most part, I do know there's something going on and there just needs to be some space for this to come out. And I have all the space for that. And I think the thing that I'm just really grateful for, not just between us, but in the conscious communities we've created, in the conscious relationships we've witnessed come together, especially in our coaching containers, it's so nourishing to see that these conscious relationships can exist. And when you see examples of them, you honestly can't go backwards.
Yeah, it really changes like your entire relationship sphere.
It really does. And then again, that also helps to give you permission to treat yourself that way, right?
Yeah.
Like to be there for yourself, to be in conscious relationship with self. And so, yeah, we're really lucky to be able to be in observation of so many of these.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking about how if you're constantly engaging in a toxic relationship or toxic behaviors with someone else, it's kind of like the license to keep doing that with yourself. Like
exactly.
It's a cycle, right? Whereas now the relationship with you and some of our clients and other people that I've really developed conscious partnerships with, it's like, would I treat this person this way? Right? I have to respond now to my own reactions with curiosity.
Right.
Because I'm not allowing myself to respond in any other way to other people. And so now the relationship to myself becomes the outsider. It's almost like that's the thing that's out of resonance. And then it forces me to look within and really heal that relationship.
I really wish I listened to this episode like 10 years ago.
Me too.
20 years ago, actually.
Oh, me too. I think something I think we can wrap up pretty soon. But one of the things I wanted to say is that obviously not all relationships. There are some that are exceptions. I think I've said that multiple times now just to protect myself. But most relationships, toxicity can be solved through curiosity, vulnerability, and non-defensiveness. And when you engage in a relationship with those factors, you can reverse whatever was toxic before and you can put an end to whatever is continuing to be toxic or put an end to what is toxic. And also any relationship can turn into toxicity when those things develop, which is why you start off like, oh my God, I fucking love you. Like you're the best. But then like slowly the curiosity dwindles, the judgment increases, the defensiveness creeps in. It's like, that's why all of a sudden you go from like being so in love or like BFFs to not.
Yeah.
Right? What happens? Was it always toxic? Or did it become toxic? And what made it toxic? I think it's really those traits. And all of humanity has the ability to embody those traits. Like, I don't think I'm a saint. I don't think you're a saint. We're not people who've never engaged in those behaviors. I've 100% been toxic before because toxicity is judgment. Toxicity is non-curiosity, right? And constantly being defensive and blaming the other person. And that's just, humans do that.
Yeah. Because sometimes you really do think it's them.
Yeah. And that's sometimes important. Like you need to go through that so you can know the opposite. Like you need to learn through contrast. But it's something that we learn as a behavior and it can also be unlearned. Or a new way can be relearned, right? Curiosity, openness, vulnerability can be learned. And those are really unfamiliar things to exercise in relationship if you're so used to constantly being defensive. Like I had a lot of avoidant behaviors throughout my life. So the idea of engaging curiously and openly, it felt like I was being like stabbed. Like I feel like I'm just laying on like train tracks, like being run over. It's so uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, like this is how I feel, right? But I now know that that was obviously a new pattern I was recreating for myself. But that it's possible. So if you are someone who is constantly engaged in like shutting people out, shutting down, not wanting to really share the truth of your emotions, you can learn that.
And if you're like me and you cling and you grab on, even though it's like burning you, you can also unlearn that.
Yes.
You can let go.
Wow. We really have like unlearned so many harmful patterns.
It's actually really funny because I'm just like visualizing this thing where I'm like gripping you and you're just like.
It was actually like that a little bit in the beginning.
It was like that a lot of it, I think.
No, it wasn't a lot of it.
You don't think a lot of it?
Because I loved you so much and I still do. But like there was like one period where I was like, I just kind of like leaned back, like, and you felt it. You felt it. But that was the perfect opportunity for me to lean in and for you to lean out. To like literally balance the scales.
It out.
Yeah, and I feel like we've really done that. Like you've leaned out just enough. I've leaned in more. And it's created this harmony.
Fast forward to my conversation with you today, which was like, can we be in contact daily?
You were like, can we make it a rule?
And then I was like, is this codependency or self-care? Because I feel like it's more self-care. But yeah, I think the last thing I want to say is really the antidote and the medicine to any toxic relationship, whether it's with yourself or with somebody else, is honesty.
Oh,
you have to be honest about how you feel. So and to be able to express that.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot be honest and you can't express that to the other person or even to yourself and really start to have a conversation about it, it will remain toxic.
Yeah, because you become resentful.
Exactly. And you're essentially living in a lie. And so for anybody who might feel like maybe I'm in a toxic relationship, start to just become really honest about how you feel in response to these behaviors, and actually allow yourself to say the things that you feel like you're not allowed to say. Because I think
without blaming.
All of those other relationships in the past, I wouldn't let myself admit how bad it was. I wouldn't let myself actually say, that really hurts when she does that. I would always be like, oh, it's not that bad. It must just be in my own head. I kind of like gaslit myself.
Totally. Which is toxic.
Which is toxic. Exactly. And so I think where it really started was when I could start to be honest about what was actually happening from a neutral perspective and then see this is damaging. And see the truth of that and then express that to the other person, which in my case did not go well. But it ended up going well because I'm not in that relationship anymore and that's okay. And so yeah, be honest, be in truth.
And look, you got what you needed. You didn't get the relationship, but you got what you needed. And so, sometimes we cling and we act in really crazy, insane ways because we think we need the relationship. But we will either get a more conscious relationship out of that situation or we'll get what we need, which is maybe a different relationship or who knows, we create space for something else better, more supportive to come in. So
yes.
Yeah. This was so healing.
Yeah, great conversation.
You're such a good podcast host.
So are you. You should have a podcast.
So if you're still with us, remember to join the free Spiraling Higher community for our free monthly connection calls. We love hosting these spaces for you to connect and meet your conscious besties, usually every last Sunday of the month. And if you want to take this work further and really learn how to heal the toxicity within and learn to self-love, self-trust, and become an agent in your own life, you can look into joining the Unlayered Self, which is our 6-month coaching mastermind starting in May.
Yes, May 28th.
That's when the journey begins. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
We're half full.
Yes.
So run to the application link now in the show notes.
And the group that is forming is just
top tier.
Top shelf, top tier. We can just already see the golden threads that are connecting their experiences. And we're so ready to begin that journey. So yeah, if you feel called to work with both of us, and I think that's really such a unique experience, not just for them, but even for us, but to have these pillars and really this holistic approach to your journey and getting that support from all angles, from the community that we'll create, but also from us. If you feel at all called to go on this journey, we encourage you to reach out and talk to us.
Yeah, free call. Whether you work with us or not, it'll be fun to connect.
Yeah, that's actually so true. Yeah.
I know. I love connecting with everyone from our community. So
Me
it'll
too.
be such a joy. So if you love this episode, also remember to leave us a 5-star review. And we will see you in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this honest conversation. We hope it brought you peace, clarity, and a little bit further along your spiritual journey.
If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to us if you left us a 5-star rating and a review so we can bring you more conscious conversations, spiritual topics, and guests.
And we lovingly invite you to join our free Spiraling Higher community by clicking the link in the show notes to continue this healing dialogue and share with us how this episode impacted you.
Come on in, introduce yourself, and meet your conscious besties in a safe space for healing conversations between us and other like-minded people on their healing journey.
Here's to spiraling higher.